Alright, this is Game Maker. I wanted to do a super simple demo for the purpose of kind of showing some easy ways you can program basic functionality for a platformer and a top-down game. So I'm just going to run through it really quickly. I recorded this footage just in one go and edit it down. So I'm just gonna kind of play through it, scrub when I need to, pause when I need to, and kind of talk over it as I play. Okay, so this is the main screen, the first welcome screen that you see whenever you open up the program. You can click down here as I think it shows my little cursor moving around. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here at the example down there, that's just a project that I have had before. And then, as I show here, you can open other programs or create a whole new one using these tabs up here. For this case, I already had just a blank empty project that I had open, so I go ahead and open that. Get rid of that window. And the first thing you want to do is start creating some sprites. My favorite is always to create just little boxes. I make them a little bit fancy with a shadow. Also really quickly here for the name, I start with SPR underscore. Do this in a lot of different engines, be it usually Unity, or it's just a habit that I've gotten into. So for sprites, I'll do SPR underscore and then whatever the name of it is. So if it's like the character, I'll put character, and that way there won't be competing assets with the same names. Like for objects, I'll do obj underscore character, just to avoid having the same name twice. Alright, so if you click edit sprite right here, and then this new page right here, I'll just click OK for this example. And then, let me go back really quickly, that was really fast. Okay. Click edit sprite, and then this little new page here will create the sprite art in here. This can hold a bunch of sprites if you wanted to create an animation. For now, I just want to use placeholders because I'm just making a proof of concept, essentially, for the demo. So I'll just hit OK. If you double click that square, you'll get to something that looks kind of like Microsoft Paint with a bunch of tools. Pencils, you know, your 1 pixel, you've got a paintbrush, an eraser, eyedropper, line, polygonal shape, rectangle. I mean, if you ever played around in any sort of art program on the, you know, digital art program or Microsoft Paint, these will look really familiar. These are your brush sizes. Over here you've got your main color and like your sort of right-click color. If you work in Photoshop, that's basically what that is. If you have a shape, this will be your stroke around the shape if you choose to select that. Color palette, opacity. If you're trying to paint and you don't see anything, make sure your opacity is at 255. We're just going to start really simple. So eventually I'll zoom in over here and grab this paint bucket tool, grab a color, fill it with that color, and then I'll take, because I like to make it fancy like I said, so I'll take the pencil tool, make it a little, I think I'd choose this size here and just draw a straight line for a shadow just to give it, you know, something a little pretty. You know, make it look like more than just a flat color. Just draw that straight line in there. When I'm done, I'll click this checkbox. Just click that checkbox to save it. Real quick, here I know I do center. So here on the grid, you'll see it in the later whenever you click rooms. It's on sort of a grid for you to organize. You know, if you have things like, if I use these 32 by 32 blocks, and what I end up doing is basing my whole project around this sort of size here. So this is kind of like for snapping. If you want to snap, you know, the corner of the box to the edge of the grid, you'd want it at 0, 0. I click center. Later I go back and change it because it's easier for me to snap it into a square, but just keep that in mind. And then I put sprite underscore red because I chose red color. Okay, and then I basically do this just to have a bunch of sprites so I don't have to worry about creating sprites for objects to use later. And it's just the same thing over and over and over again. Just fill a color, grab the pencil, draw a line, save, close out, done. Okay, so here I'm going to start making an object. So first of all, this is the object window. Right-click objects, create new object. It'll do this for you, open up this window for you. Name, very similar to the sprites window, obj underscore. First one I'm probably going to do is red. This is where you click the sprite. You'll click on this little drop-down button here, and it'll bring up, it'll show you, bring up a list where you can select the sprites that are existing already in your folder here. And that's pretty much all you need to worry about for right now. Next, you'll want to start to create an event if you already have an idea of what it is. Oh, okay. So I didn't name it red. I did hazard because I knew that it was going to be a standard, not going to move, sort of like spikes or just something that the player has to avoid. And then I'm going to make a character. What color should I choose for, usually I use like green is good, so I'll make it the goal. I guess that's why I changed that here. So green is good, red bad, so that's just, especially in something like a demo or just very recognizable colors for you to associate with good and bad and what kind of things a player should want to get or not. So here I'm just creating, with no logic attached, the objects, because you have to have objects to place them in your room. And your room is basically just, it's like a sheet of paper. Like imagine this is some graph paper and you want to start drawing like stuff that's going to happen. You have to have objects to be able to place. You can't place sprites in here, essentially. You need objects. So that's why I just created basically empty objects. They don't do anything, so I can just put them in the room whenever. And if I ever want to test, which I believe I do, I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit because I'm just creating objects here the same way I was doing before, no logic. Alright, so I'm back in the room. If you click the settings tab up here, you want to name it, and you can do room. If you want to, I just do level because I just continue to think of them as levels. So I'll just do level underscore 1. Because my sprites I created 32 by 32, I just did 320. That's just, I can put 10 squares across and they'll fit in these little squares really nicely. So that's why I did it that way. And then 620 because I know that this is going to be sort of a platformer where I want, in my demonstration, for the characters to move upward. Okay, so yellow is the floor, so I just create a simple floor here. You want to select it over here, and then you can just click, and it'll add it. If you click off of what's currently selected, you'll create a new one. If you click on it, you can click and hold it and move it around. This little drop down, you'll be able to select different objects that you've created. So I created a character and sort of where it's going to start whenever I run the game. So now I'm going to test run after saving because that's important to save your progress. Okay, so clicking that little arrow up here, you'll basically get to test run your game without, making a full build or executable. So you could see, let me go back just a second, you can see here, because these have no logic, they don't do anything, but they're showing up and, there's no issues. You want to make sure, every time you make a change or add objects that everything's working before you do a load of work and then something goes wrong and then you've done so much since your last test that you're not sure where wrong and where that's happening. So make sure you play test pretty frequently. Oops, this is wrong. I don't know why I left this in here. Ignore that. Okay, so here I'm creating actual logic. So events are basically whenever you want something to happen at a certain point. So for example, I'm creating controls for the character. So press left, key press, and left is the arrow key on your keyboard. When I press left, I'm going to set the speed the horizontal speed to a positive or negative integer. It doesn't have to be an integer. It can be, you know, a float of any kind. It can be any sort of, you know, decimal place number. And positive will take you to the right, and then negative will take you to the left. So, sort of, you know, like basic math. So I'm going to hit play here. And then the action is what's going to happen. The left key, it's going to stop moving. So I have to program that. It's a little tedious, but it's really simple, and honestly, it goes so fast. Like I know it's a pain, but you don't have to program anything. It's really simple. So just do that. And you only have to do it the one time unless you have, you know, multiple things being controlled. If you're making like a puzzle game and more than one item is moving on screen at a time. Let me go back really quickly also and talk about the speed. Oops, that's not what it is. In an action here, so your actions come up on this right side over here, and you can see there's a bunch of different tabs with different styles of stuff. You can look into that later. I'm just going to go over really basic stuff in this video. This is for the vertical speed. The self is basically, you know, denoting, okay, the character, it's the character speed that this event is affecting. And then your speed is a number that really depends on how big your game is as far as resolution. So like mine's really small. It's like 320 by 640. So my number is going to be pretty small. But if you have a huge game, like a 1920, like a full screen 1920 by 1080 game, you might have to set it faster or slower. It just depends. So just kind of put in a number and feel it out. That's how I do it. You might have a better, someone might have a better rule than that, but pretty tried and true method. Pick a number, test it out. Feels right, good. If not, go back and fudge it until it's right. And then there's, sorry, I have to go back. Okay, and then also this relative button. It's on a lot of actions, especially the move actions. For the speed, this basically means if I hit the space button, excuse me, if I hit the space button and I set the speed to like 5, it'll set that speed to 5 until I, you know, do the release spacebar, and then it goes away back to 0 because I've set it to do that. If I don't do that, if I click relative, it'll just continue to add speed on top of that. So if I, for example, like if it's a tapping game and I'm pressing the key really quickly to make my character go faster and faster, that's when you want to use relative. But that's not how I want to set up a platformer in this demo, so I'm not going to do that. All right. Alright, so said and done. Hit that green play button to test out what I've got so far, make sure everything's working. I messed up my gravity because my character just hit the floor and bounced off the screen. So I'm going back in here, and this is why I mentioned before. I thought direction would be X or Y. It's actually, it's degrees. So 0 is going to be right, 90 is down, 180 is left, and 270 is up. So I think that's right. Either way, I pick 170 for the gravity. I'm sorry, 270 for the gravity, and my character will be able to kind of bounce up and down like you would expect. And then gravity 2 is a bit heavy. There's probably science behind it that I don't bother with because, like I said, I usually just put in some numbers until something feels right and then stick with it. Oops, goes through the floor. Okay. can see that again. It's really fun when stuff like that happens. Yay! Okay. So character's still a little messed up. Oh, right, because I didn't change it to 270 yet. I thought I cut this out. Apologies. Here I've just taken the gravity out just to make sure I can move my character left and right with the left and right arrow keys, and that's working just fine. Here I'm adding walls. I've set the pink to be the walls, just for aesthetic purposes, just to show myself sort of wall versus floor asset. You would be hopefully doing that, you know, in a lot of your levels. If you were to do this, you would just make the art for obstacles, especially like walls and platforms, different than just regular floor. Also, what I'm doing here, you can see whenever I created these assets, I made that shadow on the bottom, and here are the shadows on the right side of the walls, just for aesthetic reasons. I didn't really need to do that, but you can do that by going in here and typing in the rotation, which I've done 90 degrees, which, you know, is a 90-degree rotation. And then it makes it sort of look like maybe the light source is up here somewhere and casting down so that the shadow's below the floor and then to the right of the walls. Alright, and so here now I'm going to put in the hazard, and I believe I put in the goal as well. And the goals, I don't know if I've put in at this point the logic for that yet, but basically all I did for the goal was to send it to the next room, which doesn't exist yet, so probably this doesn't have any logic to it yet. Here I'm racking my brain trying to remember how gravity works. Alright, so here I put in the 270 and set the gravity to something that makes sense. Test run my game. And voila, I've got move left and right, and I've got some gravity going. I can jump, and that's pretty cool. Yeah, goal and hazard don't do anything yet, so that's what I'm going to work on next. Alright, so I've opened the goal object, add an event. I'm going to say collision, because whenever the point of the goal is to send the character to the next room. So I'm going to say, alright, when the character comes in contact with the goal, and you can drive it if you want to open up the character object and say when the character collides with the goal, it does this. But because there's a lot of events already happening under the character event list, I'm just going to put it, you know, in here just for cleanliness. So I'm going to, you know, hit collision, select character, because that's what I want the object to look for that event. And under the main one tab, there's this button here that's, oops, this one here, that's go to next room. And that basically works how whenever I hit the play button, the first room in the list is the one that's going to launch with. So next room is basically it's just going to go down the list. You can't really see it here because I only have one room, but you'll be able to see it in just a minute. Create room, bam, there's the next room. I'm pretty sure I just close it because I want to test that, because if you don't have a room and you say go to next room, it's going to crash, give you an error, and it's not going to be good. Here I want to show the room as well. You know, I'm going to name it like level 2. And purposefully, let me go back again. I've left it 1024 by 768. Maybe I'm just saying it on purpose. I don't know if I actually did, but anyway, I leave it at 1024 by 768, and it's going to demonstrate what's going to happen to that when we get to it. Alright, playtest. Now whenever my character runs into the goal, it should send me to an empty room. Bam, empty room. So that works. Now I want to do the logic for the hazard. And for this, I just want it to restart the room. So I'm going to say when it collides with the character, I'm going to restart the room, which is also under the main one tab. Apparently I'm lost. It's under the, come on, man. It's under the main one. There you go. Alright, and that's this little guy right here. You were just there. Go back. What are you trying to do? What are you looking for? Oh my gosh. I'm gonna go back. Oops, I was right there. Alright, so basically under the main one tab, there's this restart room button right here, which is basically just going to take as if you had just launched the room. So it's just going to reset everything as it was when it started. That's just a really easy way to do that. Alright, hit play. Now when I run into the hazard object, it should drop me back where I started. Oops, okay, well I ran into the goal. I guess just making sure that still works, which you should. It's a good idea. Alright, hazard. Now you can see my character just keeps dropping. That's the only thing that's really changing throughout, the playtime. Alright, here I'm just going to kind of build some platforms because, this demonstration is supposed to, be if you want to make a platformer. And also what I want to show here, if there are some tips over here, and they'll always be here, so if you forget them, you don't need to come back to the video. They're right here. What I'm doing here is, if you hold down Shift and Control, you can just sort of hold the left mouse key, and you'll just like paint in the objects, instead of having to click one by one to add them. And if you're doing something like a floor or walls, or just something that you just need to fill in a large space, that's a really fast and easy way to do that. All right, yeah, we want some challenge, so we're gonna put the goal on top. I need to change the gravity. The character is a little too heavy. So now I've lowered the gravity. So my character is gonna be a little floaty. Yeah, kind of like jumping on the moon. You might want that. You might not. I don't know. Depends on your game and what you want to do. I want some weight to my character though, so I'm going to increase the gravity and make it a little bit more of a challenge. I'm just going to skip ahead. Alright, so that's pretty good. Moving left and right, and my jump, it's a little floaty, if I'm being honest, but the height I'm happy with. I still can't reach those platforms though, so I'm gonna come in here, open up my level editor, or sorry, my room properties window, and kind of lower these all so that the character can, sensibly climb up them. I'm gonna skip through here while I do that. So I've sort of just lowered it. I could make a bunch, but this is just for demonstrative purposes. I'm not trying to make the next Super Meat Boy or anything. So. Cool. Character moves. I can jump. Still a little floaty, but that's alright. Alright, and I've set don't know if you saw it earlier, but I set whenever the character runs into the floor, it stops moving. And that means that's sort of like now if I'm moving into the floor, I can stick to it. And that's kind of like a wall grab, which is pretty cool. It's really easy to do that in that way. Just sort of jump and then hold into the wall to stick to it. And I don't want to hold and stick into the enemy. And I've learned to already sort of cheat the system over here. Alright, so like here I'm holding down the key and I'm able to stick and slide and jump. And it's that took me, one action, one event, and I was able to do that, so that's really neat. I don't know if they intended for that to happen, but it works that way. You might run into issues later if you try to make something more complex, but for that it works pretty well. Alright. Here I'm going to start working on level 2, which is going to be the top-down level. Okay, here I also want to mention I changed because I'm going to have two different characters because they have two different movement schemes. So I put a 1 here, but since I've already created all this stuff, actually I'll just hit play, you'll see in a second. Since I already have a lot of logic tied to the character, whenever I hit play it's going to give me an error. So be careful whenever you go in and start changing names. You might run into some issues. Okay, here I'm creating the logic for the character for the top-down game. And it's basically the same. Instead of setting speed, because I'm basically just crawling or walking, imagine like where you can move up and down, left and right, or like Undertale or something like that where it's kind of top-down. This is basically that sort of movement scheme, whereas before it was very two-dimensional. You're only moving left and right and jumping. This is like I said, kind of like Pokemon. You can move up, left, right, down, and you traverse terrain in a totally different way than you would a platformer. So I'm using the move fixed, and I can set direction. I press a key, press right, I move right. When I release the right key, just hit that center block with a speed of 0 because I honestly, there's really no reason for you to do that. So yeah, here we go. I'm just going to change the width back to 320. Hey girl, it's 320, not 360. There you go. Good job. 640. No, not 3 times. There you go. Alright, move that character back on so he's not falling. I guess it wouldn't be falling off, but there we go. So now I just hit run, and because they are the same resolution, already running into the hazard like a noob. Now it looks alright. Now it looks like it should. Okay, so now I need to create some stuff for my character in the top-down level to interact with. So I'm going to reuse the hazard. So that's basically like your spike pit or just something static that you shouldn't walk on. It's going to hurt you. And in this case, I'm going to do the same thing where if you hit the hazard, you restart the level. And because I've specified my platforming character for this, I also need to create another event for the other character so that whenever you run into the new character, it performs a bit of logic there. Excuse me. So I come in here, same way as before, object character 2, and I'm basically just going to say restart the room because it's just going to stay the current room. Fool, come on, it's in main 1. I've talked about this already, why don't you listen to me? There we go. Okay, bam. Also need to go to the goal and set that for the new character. And I'm actually going to set it back to go to the previous room. So now whenever I hit the goals, I'm just going to go back and forth because this is just a demonstration. I'm not trying to make a game here. Alright, so now I've opened up my level 2, my top-down level, and I'm just adding in hazards and a goal for me to make sure my logic is working here whenever I test run the game and make it through the first level and then to the second level. Oh, hey! Okay, so I forgot that I also went ahead and added walls, which actually is the floor asset, that's okay. Yellow's nice. But I basically built that the same way I did the platformer, where I just control and shift and dragged the floor, just sort of in random shapes. But, now you can kind of see my design here is, alright, character needs to go up here, be careful coming through here, and then make it over to the goal. Alright. But remember, I did it with the hazard and the goal, didn't do it with the floor. There is no collision, so my character can just walk right through it. So I basically have to go back and program the floor, the wall, the hazard, and the goal to interact with this character. But I'll go back and play that again. You can see the logic that I did set events for work. So I run into the hazard and my level starts over. Bam. And then I run into the goal and it goes to the first level. So those are working, so that's good. I just need to make sure I add a blocker, a collision. For your platforming game, that doesn't really need to happen as long as you sort of make it solid. Your character will just collide with it naturally. But for, when you can move up and down through it, you're basically forcing your character to move through it. So you want to make sure that you block that off by just saying, hey, when it collides with the character, make sure that character doesn't move. Which I've solved. Actually, let me go back one more time. Collision, character 2. I've basically set it so that here it'll select other, stop, because my other in this case is character 2. Even though my logic is on the floor, selecting other just selects, the only other option. If you click object, a little drop down will appear and it can affect, anything else happening in your room, but there's really nothing else that I want to change, so I'm just going to hit blamp and go. Oh, okay. So I play tested the collision with the floor and it works. Here I've created a sprite for the enemy. So in this section, I want to talk about sort of like patrolling enemies. Enemies that go back and forth, up and down. You can get more complicated and set them to sort of follow a path or walk a certain amount of steps and then make a change. You can also get even more complicated and make enemies follow the character. But in this case, I just basically make the enemy either, a mindless drone that walks back and forth, or maybe like if you've ever played Zelda, like the little discs with the spikes coming out of them, and they just sort of hit a wall and go back and forth, that's basically what I want to create right now. So I've just called it enemy with the sprite, and I'm going to create an object. I already created an object, but I need to tag a sprite with it. And basically, I'm going to make a create event. So whenever that object is created in the level, oh, sorry, first I guess I'm going to say, hey, when you hit a wall, when you collide with the wall, reverse horizontal direction. I haven't set the movement yet, but alright, so this create event, I can just set a direction here. So whenever this object is created in the room, it's going to go right at a speed of 2. And whenever it hits that wall, it'll just reverse its horizontal direction. Here I need to add them to the level, because I've only got hazards in here right now. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I think I play around with that idea. Alright, so I just want to test it with that fella right there. He's just going to hopefully bounce back and forth. And I need to make sure, because he's an enemy, that when he collides with my character, he restarts the level. Just like the hazard. Alright, look at that. Oops. You know what I did? I painted all of my walls as floors, and I have it so when he collides with a wall, which is the pink one, he'll reverse direction here. And there are no walls in my level. So I can change that here. Now whenever he collides with the floor, he'll go back and forth. Ta-da! And whenever he hits the character, it restarts the level. Perfect. Alright, so because I want to make, an enemy that goes left and right, and then I want to make a different enemy with the same sprite that goes up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and change to where he's going to collide with the walls, and I'm going to swap out assets. I'm going to make these yellow walls into pink walls, so that whenever he collides with a pink wall, he's going to go reverse his horizontal direction. And whenever the other enemy that I'm going to create runs into the floor, because it's on the bottom, he's going to go up, he's going to reverse his vertical direction. So here you go. Those are my pink walls. So anytime, if I were to add more of the horizontal enemies, he would, you know, any amount of them could bounce back and forth. Alright, so I've named him Enemy 2. In hindsight, I wish I had named my first one horizontal and my second one vertical, but that's okay. That's just from me. Your user at the end of the day isn't going to know what you named these objects. They're just going to see the color and know that it's a bad thing. So in the similar fashion, I say when it collides with the character, that's not what I want. Oops, delete. Okay, so when it collides with the character, unless I'm going to add a different event here. Alright, when it collides with the character, it's going to restart the current room, just like the hazard, just like the horizontal enemy. When it creates, it's going to go in a vertical direction at the speed of 4. So he's going to move a little bit faster. And when he collides with the floor, like I mentioned earlier, he will be reversing his vertical direction, which is this guy right here, right next to the horizontal direction. So I basically need to swap out maybe a horizontal enemy, or a hazard, sorry, swap out the hazard and put in a enemy 2. Oh, and you can see I've redesigned the level a little bit. Before it was, you could go, yeah, I could see, you know, these guys go back and forth, and this guy would go up and down, but my character could just sort of, you know, not even have to worry about him. So I've changed up the level a little bit so that the character has to be forced to figure out or time themselves or whatever around this hazard right here, or this enemy right here. So that's all I changed right there. So I'm going to hit play. Oh, sorry. I'm going to, what am I doing here? Make some more changes. Oh, okay. So I've made a little nook. So now my character, whenever I play, needs to make sure to avoid this one in time. Goes up here, can hide in here, wait for him to go past again, and follow him quickly up there. Oh, no, I died. Oh, no. So I guess he's moving a little too fast. So what I need to do is either change up the level or change the speed of the enemy. I kind of like that he moves at a different speed. So I'm going to move this up here a little bit. Give him some more time before he comes back. Give the character more time so he can come through here. You know, wait just a second and then have more time to, you know, get around the enemy without getting hit. Play. Oops. Well, basically you hit play and it works out. You get through. So yeah, that's basically it. That's, you know, if you want to make a top-down or a platformer, those are very simple ways to at least get started. You've got your, let's go back here. You've got, you know, your basic logic to use gravity, so you're jumping, and then you've got your up, down, left, right for your top down, and you've figured out how to end your game. Restart the level, go to the next game, whatever. So basically this is just to get you started designing your level. Alright, thanks. Hope you have learned all you need to know.